Welcome to the Veteran Entrepreneur Masterclass with Brett Henderson, founder of Strategic Wealth Endeavor. We've created a community of veteran entrepreneurs just like you who are ready to help you succeed. Our podcast provides expert advice and resources so you can overcome any obstacle in your way. With the help of Brett and veteran guest experts, you can build a battle-ready business mindset to take your company to the next level. Thank you for listening to the Veteran Entrepreneur Masterclass. Now, on to the show.
Brett Henderson's guest is Patrick Gough, the CEO of Poseidon Consulting, a company he founded in 2018. The retired Marine colonel provides companies with expertise in areas that range from leadership development to labor relations, organizational culture, and, of course, everything military. So, Brett, why don't you introduce your guest a little bit more for us?
Sure thing. So thanks, Patrice. Appreciate that. Morning, Patrick. How are you, sir?
Hey, good morning, Brett. I'm doing great. Thank you very much.
Do you prefer Paddy or Patrick?
Paddy.
Paddy. All right. I'll call you Paddy. Irish S can be there, which is a good thing. So this is interesting for me. This is the first guest, or you were the first guest I've never met. And have we had a phone call? Have we had, besides a couple of emails, have you and I had any conversations like this before the podcast?
No, absolutely not. And in fact, if you and I were at the airport, I would have walked right by you because I had no idea what you looked like.
So humbly, this is a new experience for me. This is uncharted waters. So we'll see how it goes. I don't mind sharing. You and I were connected a couple of years ago on LinkedIn. I probably found you and saw your Marine colonel and saw your business and probably threw a random connection out there. And then humbly, before we did our rebrand and we're completely focused on serving the veteran entrepreneur community, I'm a 401k consultant. That's my background. That's my corporate experience. And hey, you're a business owner. You probably have a 401k. So we connected and I just pitched you. And what'd you say?
No.
Exactly. And then I said, hey, do you want to get together for a drink or beer? What'd you say?
No.
So we have zero relationship. We've never met, never had a conversation. And then we did our rebrand and I completely shifted and focused because I, like you on LinkedIn, kept getting connection requests and everyone, once they connect, just pitches you just like, hey, I'd love to get to know you, but I'd love to learn more about you. And for me, as I was sharing before, the word love is a trigger that just pushes me away. So anyone in business, if you're trying to build relationships on LinkedIn through networking, don't tell someone you just met and don't know that you love anything about them or you love to do anything. So that being said, so as we shifted and we're starting to build the podcast and only for my firm shifted to only wanting to work and help and serve the veteran entrepreneur community, what was the catalyst to finally have you say yes? And how did you decide to come and speak with us today?
Passion of mine, Brett, is helping veterans. And once I connected the dots about what you were about and helping veterans through the transition process, at that point it became idiot proof. I mean, Paddy proof. I try to help individual veterans. I probably helped about 1,000 transitioning veterans from all the services over the past 14 or 15 years since I retired from the Marine Corps. And the way I do it is I try to make sure that they understand the mistakes that I made so that they don't make those same mistakes. And then provide some insight as far as helping them edit their resumes so that we take the military terminology out and translate that into something that a non-military civilian hiring manager would understand and therefore not throw their resume into the trash can right away, so that they at least get a chance at an interview. Because once a veteran gets an interview, chances are highly likely that they'll be able to convince people to hire them on board.
No, that's great. That's great. So before we continue on the corporate side, give us a little bit about your military background. I know you're a colonel and you've done many things. You're on the air wing side, but why don't you just kind of share what your decision was even before you went in the Marine Corps to go in the Marine Corps, and then throughout your career, and then once you got towards the twilight years of your career as a colonel, when you made that decision, or did the Marine Corps make the decision for you to end your career? And just kind of share about your mindset before and after, if you don't mind.
No, I appreciate that. I grew up in Southern California, and throughout college, I rode my motorcycle about 150 miles a day as a courier. And one of the pickup points happened to be right close to Marine Corps Air Station El Toro. And I would stop on my motorcycle at the departure end of the runways and watch the F4s and the A4s take off over my head. And that's when I decided I really wanted to come into the Marine Corps and fly. And that it helped me stay in school, helped me motivate myself to go to class, because there was a goal at the end of the rainbow there for me. And so I became a Marine officer. I went to the basic school, went to flight school, finished first in my class, got to choose what I wanted to fly. I fell in love with the Cobra attack helicopter. So I thankfully can say that I was an operational aviator flying Cobra attack helicopters for 30 years, 29 years because I didn't have Cobras in flight school. But I was a squadron commander, 27 aircraft, 350 Marines. I was a Marine Aviation Weapons and Tactics Squadron 1, which is the Marine equivalent of Top Gun, for 4 years. MOTS, yeah, down in Yuma, Arizona. And then I became the group commander at Marine Aircraft Group 39 at Camp Pendleton before transitioning to making the decision to not go to the 5-sided wind tunnel, formerly known as the Pentagon. My wife was diagnosed with what could have been a terminal illness, and the Navy medicine said that they really couldn't do anything more for her, and we were under the care of a great doctor here at Scripps Torrey Pines in San Diego. So to answer your last question, I decided to leave the Marine Corps on my terms rather than chase the ever elusive star by going to the Pentagon, and do the right thing for myself and my family. And I would not change that decision now in retrospect. It was absolutely the right reason to do what I should have had the guts to do years before, perhaps. But then from the Marine Corps, I was actually recruited out of the Marine Corps by Orange County Transportation Authority. Their CEO got to know me through a networking event at my former university, California State University, Fullerton. I gave him some advice. He didn't particularly like it, but he liked the honesty with which I gave the advice, and asked to meet with me again. I told him no. There's a trend here, Brett, and he insisted. So I went there. I wasn't smart enough to realize that I was being interviewed. So that's another piece of advice. Always be ready to be interviewed, because you may not know that you're going to get interviewed. And a couple of weeks later, he hired me. And so I did that for 6 years, but I had a passion still for the military, veterans, active duty, and aviation. And I was recruited out of my executive director position at Orange County Transportation Authority to PKL Services, where I became the chief operating officer about 5 years, and then fleeted up to become the CEO for 2 years, and then retired from that position in December of last year. And since then, we started a new business with 2 attorney friends of mine that were involved with helping people, mostly American companies, expand their portfolio into the international business realm by providing them with all the advice that they need in order to avoid the pitfalls of doing business overseas. So wow. That brings us to date.
Okay, well, thanks for sharing that. A couple of things there. I'll go off. Well, there's no script, right? But I'll just go off script. Snell. I can't remember the rank he would have been, lieutenant colonel or major. Snell. He was a Cobra pilot. He was at Tulane RTC with me. Does that name ring a bell?
It does, but I'm very old, Brett.
You're experienced. He was commissioned in probably 96 or 7, a couple of years older than me. No. Brock. No, Snell was another buddy. Sorry, Brunk. That's the name, not Brunk, not Snell. Brunk. No. Does Brunk ring a bell? Yeah, he was a Cobra guy. And then how about Rivaldi? Throw one more name at you. He was a Huey guy. He did MOTS on the Huey side. He and I were commissioned at the same time, same class in 98. But few of my friends that were in on the aviation side were pilots. So Brunk was a Cobra guy, Aldi a Huey guy. Snell was probably a grunt. I can't remember what he went into, but he was a good dude. Anyway, so off script, not on script because we have no script, but just name checking there on the Cobra side. So going back, I am curious about, though, when you decided to get out, you said it was on your terms and the best decision you ever made. Are you comfortable? Would you be open to sharing a little bit more about that mindset? So you said the chasing the elusive star, obviously for a 1-star, go to Pentagon, you have to do that. You decided no. You said it's the right thing for you and your family. Can you talk about your mindset? Because that's, if you think about our listeners, everyone here is thinking, how do I be the best entrepreneur, executive I can be? And it's all about mindset. So would you mind sharing a little bit about your mindset when you decided to get out, what that catalyst was?
Yeah, it was really, I guess selfishly is probably the wrong word, but for lack of anything better at this point, selfishly driven. My wife had endured so much being a military wife. We got married when we were in college. So she was with me through 30 years of hell on earth, 4 combat tours, 8 overseas deployments, 1 crash, the loss of, we totaled it up one day, as morbid as this may sound, but 84 friends that have been killed in aviation related accidents or mishaps in combat and in peacetime. And she sacrificed. She was a single. She busted her butt, working her tail off, trying to take care of 2 kids while I was off doing the business of the Marine Corps throughout the world. And in the old days, you didn't have instantaneous communications. You couldn't call home. In fact, on my second overseas deployment aboard ship, I received a letter from her from my first overseas deployment.
Oh, wow.
So,
Wow.
yeah, it's not at all like it is today. But she sacrificed so much for our family and for my career. She put her medical career on hold to raise 2 kids because we agreed that focusing on the upbringing of our children was the most important thing. And again, another decision that we don't regret at all. But when she was facing a potentially terminal illness and was going through chemo and damn near died a couple of times, I just couldn't look at things from a careerist perspective and potentially cost her life when Navy medicine said they couldn't do anything more. So we rolled the bones and stuck with the doctor that she still has, by the way, and she's been cured.
Awesome.
Everything is fine. So from that perspective, yeah, was it a tough decision to say I'm going to put my family before the Marine Corps? I would be lying if I said no. It was a tough decision because the Marine Corps is everything that I knew, everything that I loved, and I will use the term love there. I loved my brothers and sisters in the Marine Corps, whom I had the honor of serving with. I still do, but I love my family more. At a point, you have to grow up and put your big boy pants on and make that tough decision. And therein lies the next thing that I encountered was fear.
Please share.
How do I transition into something in the civilian sector and be successful? Because military folks, you don't get ahead in the Marine Corps or the military, any of the services. They're all performance based. You're not going to get promoted if you aren't capable. And how am I going to be able to translate what I did in the Marine Corps to people who may not understand the military at all and be successful? Because I don't want to fail. We all don't want to fail. And it really didn't hit me because I was recruited by the CEO of Orange County Transportation Authority to come aboard, got to know me through networking. And I said, I told him, frankly, I don't know anything about buses, trains, and building highways. And he goes, look, in 6 months, I can teach you all you need to know about that. But you've forgotten more about leadership than the rest of my executive team combined. And I want you to lead this company, this organization, and teach us those things. I stepped out of the Marine Corps on a Thursday afternoon. We went to Napa over the weekend, and I started work on Monday.
Wow.
And that was November of 2008. And driving home from Orange County to Carlsbad, San Diego, which was my commute every day, which was stupid, but yeah, okay, got it. Around Christmas time, it hit me. What have I just done? How am I going to make this work? Oh my God, I'm an executive in a civilian organization that I don't know anything about. How am I going to make this work? And really what it boiled down to is, I came home and talked to my wife, and she said, do what you've always done. Do what you did to be successful in the Marine Corps, and you'll be successful in the civilian sector as well. And that just meant being responsible, nose to the grindstone, diligent, research, read, prepare, and treat people as you want to be treated yourself. Leadership is leadership. I'm a big proponent of leadership of people, management of programs. You don't manage people because then you're treating people like cattle with just numbers and not really getting to know them. So that's what I did, and it's served me very, very well. And Now my passion is to pass along what I've learned through my own mistakes and some successes to those veterans who follow in my footsteps and encounter that same level of fear of the unknown as they transition forward. Does that answer your question, Brett?
It begins to, but it leads to many more questions, doesn't it? Right? The fear, the mindset is everything. I'm going to ask you a question, and I know you're going to be honest. I didn't prep for this and just popped in my mind. Do you feel leading people is more difficult in corporate America or the Marine Corps?
Yeah.
And this question was not planned. I didn't give you this one ahead of time. This just came up as we're chatting. I have my answer. I want to hear yours.
Yeah, and thanks for the surprise ambush.
Welcome to my jungle.
Yeah, the reason I hesitate is because my leadership of Marines was not just me. The Marine Corps takes somebody off the street and transforms them. And I don't mean to belittle or ignore the other services, because anybody who serves in any military branch, God bless you all. We've all done things for a reason beyond our own selfish needs. Joining the military is bigger than just oneself. So for that, thank you. But for my personal experience in the Marine Corps takes somebody off the street, transitions them into being a Marine, and therefore you become a Marine for life. And you embody those things that the Marine Corps teaches you. I had the luxury of inheriting those folks had gone through boot camp and the basic school and flight school and their tech schools, and they had been imbued with and embodied with those leadership skills at a basic level by the time they got to me. So, my responsibility at that point was, don't screw it up, Paddy. They came to me with a very, very solid foundation of leadership. And all I had to do was figure out how to tweak them and help them lead and give them some of my personal leadership philosophy and help add that to their toolbox. But they had a full toolbox before they got to me in most cases. And in some cases, some of my senior staff NCO leaders, like I told them the first day that I took command, I looked out in the crowd and they had all been Lance Corporals and Corporals when I was a lieutenant and a captain. And I said, if you don't like the type of squadron commander and a leader that I am, it's not my fault, it's yours. You raised me. Because any officer understands that, where the rubber really meets the road is with the non-commissioned officers and staff non-commissioned officers in any kind of unit. So now circling back to, is it harder to be a leader in the military or civilian? I would say civilian, because the foundation of leadership 99% of the time is not there like it's there in the military. So you have a very, and I don't mean to disparage any generations, but you have generations of people that are more about me than about the organization or the bigger picture or doing something that is non-selfish, unselfish. And it's not necessarily their fault, but institutions of higher learning are not teaching people about leadership as they should be, preparing them to go from college or from high school into jobs where they're expected to be put in charge of people. What I saw with the executive leadership at OCTA, those individuals were some of the finest individuals I've ever come across. And they got promoted from entry-level positions over 20 or 30 years all the way up through the executive level. And in some cases, the people that they oversaw hated them. They were technically the most proficient people at their job, but they had never been given a parallel track of leadership development along with their technical development. And as such, their subordinates revolted or left. And that's unfortunate. And we tried to fix that. So yeah, to answer your question long-windedly, civilian leadership is tougher. It's a bigger challenge.
I appreciate that. And actually, I have the exact same answer. So the Marine Corps, and for full disclosure again, and anyone who's listening, I am a peacetime Marine. I was in 98 through 02. Kosovo happened when I was in, but the second ground war started in March of 03, and I got out September 02. So I was a peacetime Marine. And when I got out, I was recruited by Cintas, it's a uniform company. And I did a year and a half with them as a service manager. So they gave me a team of guys riding around in trucks and selling uniforms and doing laundry service for, butcher shops, automotive, manufacturing, anyone wears a uniform during work. That's what Cintas does. And they put me in this location or hired me in this location, actually myself and 2 Army officers. So we have a screwed up location. These guys are all a bunch of knuckleheads. Fix it. Like, you're a Marine, fix it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, let's go and talk about fear of the unknown. What I learned or experienced very, very quickly, the difference in leadership in the Marine Corps and civilian sector is Marine Corps or any military organization, your team has to be there until the job is done, right? There's no 8-hour workday. It is what it is. And in corporate America or civilian America, you have a team, you got an 8-hour workday. The job has to be done ideally in 8 hours. If anything over 8 hours, if your team's hourly, then it's time and a half. 12 hours is double time. So you have a new constraint, a new variable, which I never had to deal with in Marine Corps, is time of the day. At the same time, if your team doesn't like your style in the Marine Corps, guess what? Who cares? Not to say who cares, your guys care, they'll lose respect for you, but your team is your team. They're not going to go away, right? In corporate America, if your team doesn't like, trust, respect you, they're not to ideally like you, but trust, respect you, they can go get another job. They can leave. They can go somewhere else. So there's another dynamic that your team doesn't have to be your team. And you must ideally lead your team versus manage to make them like, trust, respect you so they stay and grow. And then, so it's a different dynamic. And I agree with you. I think leading a team, the civilian sector, is harder than it was for me in the Marine Corps because of those other variables, which you just don't have in the Marine Corps. So I appreciate you sharing and saying that, because I think a lot of our other listeners probably feel the same way. We have this team, and your team is trained and they know what they're doing and they rock and roll. You could say you're the battalion CO of any unit or an XO of any unit. Doesn't matter if it's a combat arms or combat service support. Like, your team knows what they're doing. You can be gone, your team's going to rock and roll, right? You can be gone and your team's going to rock and roll. And that's when you know you've got good leaders in place. But in corporate America, that isn't necessarily the case. And it takes time to build and shift. So I appreciate you sharing that.
If I could add
please,
just a little bit on that. Yeah.
Please.
Not only is it difficult to do that, but I faced fighting the Hollywood stereotypical model of, oh my God, there's this new executive director coming in and he's a Marine.
Talk about that. Yeah.
What's he gonna make us do? Is, we're gonna fall out into the parking lot in the morning at 9:00 and do push-ups and pull-ups and run 3 miles before we start work. And I jokingly said, no, we'll be all done with that by 9:00. We're coming in early. And so it's not only are you trying to transition in your own mind, but you're having to convince people that your style of leadership is not military leadership as would be done in the military. That you do have a heart, that you do have a family, that you do understand them. And once you convince, and it's not just add water and stir 3 times. I mean, it takes a lot of hard work on your part to be able to break those stereotypical mindsets of people who fear you because you're a wild man. You're from the military. Oh my God, you carried a gun for a living. So understand that leadership in the military has challenges. Leadership in the civilian sector for somebody who is former military has very different challenges, and you need to think strategically about how you will conquer those challenges without, as you said, Brett, alienating your team and have them depart, because retention is something that translates to the bottom line. And in business, the bottom line is everything.
Now, I appreciate you sharing that. I think, humbly, I felt that, and to hear you say that, it's just calming. It's just the fact this whole podcast, what we're trying to create is a community for other veteran entrepreneurs to realize they're not alone. They're not going through this. And I never had the conversation you and I just had with any of my peers. We just maybe one line here and there off the cuff, like, it is what it is. But the fact you just shared that, I think is huge, because it was confirming for me and comforting for me to hear you say that, to know I'm not the only one going through that or that experienced that. And I still deal with that today. I was at a conference this weekend, and I mean, as you saw the post on LinkedIn or not, one guy stood up and was quoting the Marine Corps for some things. Any veterans here? And I was the only Marine to sound off with a bark in a room of 300 people. I still bark, which is fine. And people just look at you differently. It's just funny. And I look at it as a positive thing, but there are stereotypes. And oh, he's just aggressive. He's just this. He's just that. Well, I'm a passionate person. I wear my emotions on my sleeve. It's who I am. It's not because I'm a Marine. I'm a Marine. I'm Brett. I am a Marine. I was in the Marines, but I'm still who I am. And it's a piece of me, but it's not all of me. But yes, we do have to. It's a double-edged sword being a prior Marine officer or just a veteran in corporate America. People respect you more. They think you're going to get more done. They think you can walk on water. They think you're a magician. You could just magically snap your hands and fix a situation. But at the same time, people will, if they're not on board, so to speak, or they don't like your leadership style or the way you're mentoring or giving feedback to the younger generation, it's very easy. They're just a Marine. They're just this. Just very easy to accuse and attack and just throw a negative stereotype and use it against you. So I think it is a double-edged sword, which is something we all have to face, right? But being able to recognize that and shift your leadership style accordingly, I think is huge. So being self-aware is huge. So appreciate that. So to keep us on track, I have two more kind of questions for you, if that's all right. Sure. So now fast forward to what you're doing now. I'd love to understand. No, I just said I love. Wow. Well, I love this conversation. This is true. And that's not a Freudian slip. I enjoy everything about this. So I'll keep going with it. Okay. I just said love and I said I hate love. That's fun. But your last gig, you finished up as a consultant or interim CEO. And then you said, okay, team, I'm starting a new gig. You found two attorneys. What was the mindset for you or the thought process? I mean, when you finished a gig and say, I want to start this new gig, what was the catalyst for you? Or when did you make up your mind, say, this is what I should do? And this is where I'm focusing all my attention moving forward. So this is all about mindset of embracing the unknown and making a decision to go a direction that you don't know if it's going to work. You have no idea if it's going to work, but you're all in and you're not going to fail. Well, maybe that's your mindset. Also, I'll ask you. So what was your mindset, if you don't mind sharing, into the thought process of going from your last gig to where you're going today?
Sure. Everybody times out, and whether you're, let's just use the Marine Corps, for instance, even the Commandant of the Marine Corps at some point is going to be asked to leave. And so I left on my terms from the Marine Corps. There are other people who leave on the Marine Corps' terms, and that's fine. But while you're in, maybe it's something that the Marine Corps planning process steeped into our minds, that always have a plan, because you can audibilize at the line from your playbook. But if you don't have a playbook, you're screwed once you get up there and the defense changes. So in 2018, even though I was still the chief operating officer for an aerospace company, I saw that I'm getting older and I want to have something to do, not as a hobby, but something to keep my mind engaged and to help others, especially transitioning military folks, on the backside of my corporate career. So that's when I founded Poseidon Consulting. And I was pretty busy as a COO for a while, and then I got even busier as a CEO for a while. So when I retired in December from that aerospace company, I had already established my consulting company. And I really didn't, I still to this day have not advertised my consulting company. It was my network that had been established throughout the years, both on the military and civilian side, that had people, once they found out that I was now available to consult, they reached out. And as luck would have it, somebody who was trying to buy the company that I retired from, when he found out that I was available, he also had a group of companies in Florida that were being mismanaged by the C-suite folks that he had brought on. And he asked me to come to his office here in San Diego County and sat down and talked to him. And you'll love this one, Paddy. I want you to move your family from San Diego to Fort Lauderdale and become the CEO and fix what's broken there? And my response was no. And so you see a trend here, Brett.
Yeah.
But he eventually talked me into taking it on as an interim CEO and help him diagnose the problem, whether the companies were salvageable or not, so that he could cut and run if he needed to, and then also agree to help him select my successor as the CEO. And he agreed to pay me a lot of money to do that. And I was right at the time I was undergoing the cancer treatment and the like. I had to make sure that I was allowed to split time between there and here, because I had to come back in for my family and also for treatments and the like. So he agreed to all that.
Okay.
And we went down there, took a look at things, very, very quickly diagnosed the problem. He was very helpful in doing things. And we turned a negative cash flow into almost $1 million positive cash flow inside of 3 weeks.
Wow.
And we found the guy that wanted to come on board and be the full-time CEO there. And so that worked out great. Again, another opportunity and so my consulting company is still up and running, but now I was taken away from that by another opportunity with two people who I had business connections, colleagues that I had encountered over the last couple of years, that formed their own law group and asked me if I would come aboard and be a 1/3 equity partner with the two of them, starting up an international business brokerage company. And we went live with that on August 16th. So, now, and the happiest person on the planet is my wife, because in the 45 years we've been married, during the 30 years in the Marine Corps, I was gone seemingly half the time. And with COVID and now working from home in offices adjacent here in the house, she's the happiest person in the world to see me get out of the house and actually get back into the workforce and give her some free time. So it all works. It all
comes
out.
together. It all comes together. So any fears with going? Your partners are lawyers and you're a pilot. Well, any thoughts about that? When these two guys are going to be able to communicate differently, effectively? Any thoughts there as you put that together?
Oh yeah, they have been colleagues of mine for the past couple of years. We already had that relationship of trust and mutual respect established, but they're very, very, very smart. They're very well versed in all the legal aspects of what our new business requires. I'm not a lawyer. But they've never run large and complex organizations. They've never led teams of people. They don't know what they don't know, and I don't know what they know. And so there's not a lot of overlap as far as duplication of effort. There's some redundancy built in by the nature of our triumvirate organization, but we all have specific lanes that we get together with, and in about 45 minutes or so, I'll be having our weekly meeting with the other two partners to figure out where we're going and what we're doing. But we've been in business a month, and we've already got huge clients internationally that we're dealing with on behalf of companies here in the United States and other companies that want to move their business interests elsewhere. Yeah, there's fear. Have I ever done that before? No. Have I started up a company before? A major company before? No. Am I scared about it? No. Not really. And if it had been the first time that I've ever dealt with anything in the civilian sector, yes, there would be that fear factor. But I identified the fear with my initial transition. I set a track record of success and failures that I learned from. And now I'm going into this much more prepared with a much more strategic vision towards the future based on the experiential growth that I've had over the last 15 years. So I'm not going in cold anymore.
Right.
I mean, I've spent almost half as much time out of the Marine Corps as I did in the Marine Corps. And that level of experience, that level of networking, has translated itself. And the other thing that I would add to that is,
please,
networking is so important. When I was the COO, for those history folks, you all heard about the purges of Stalin pre-World War II. They called it the Paddy purges. I looked at everybody that was an external support service provider to the company that I was a COO for. And if they weren't value added or they were screwing things up, when I catch math errors on a valuation report, an annual valuation report, there's a serious problem. So I fired them all. Lawyers, accountants, insurance folks, everybody. I fired them all. But I didn't fire them until I had the varsity team lined up to come in behind them. Networking is good for your own personal growth and your own career aspirations. But once you're in a position, then surround yourself with absolutely the varsity team of duty experts that you know and you trust, and let them do what they're there to do. I flew Cobra helicopters for a living. I couldn't turn a wrench, and they wouldn't let me even near the toolboxes to turn wrenches. And they were smart. So the experts that I had on the flight line fixing our aircraft, I didn't get in their business. I helped them to do their job. Same thing with the business world. Surround yourself with brilliant people, and your focus in life as the leader is to stop the BS that flows from up high down low and let them devote their time and energy to what they do best, and everybody will be successful.
I think that's great. There's actually 2 episodes I think that just came out of that. One thing we could chat about is, what are our biggest failures? That's a whole podcast of itself. Admitting failures, learning from failure. Every time you get kicked in the face, punched in the gut, you learn from it, right? And you get up and rock and roll. And I think another piece you added there, which is huge for any veteran entrepreneur, is you're not the same person when you get out as you are 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, right? Your role changes, your experience changes, your confidence changes as you have those failures. And failing is part of it. Failing's to be expected. If you don't fail, something's wrong, right? You're not trying hard enough. You're not failing. And I think today's generation, sometimes I've seen, is afraid to fail.
Yes.
And they just don't want to fail. And you have to fail if you want to grow. I can say I am a failure, right? And that's my own success is the failures I had, just a sum of learning from those lessons. So we could talk about that. And another piece, actually, which could be a whole nother episode. I spoke to a gentleman last week who is still a Navy SEAL, but he's no longer in. He had 20 years in the teams, and he's been married for over 30 years. And you've been married for how many years?
45.
45. That is a podcast in of itself for a military veteran entrepreneur to be married for 45 years. Actually, we need to have your wife on the podcast to kind of go through that more than you. That's amazing. So I appreciate you sharing that. That literally is a whole thing to keep relationships working, personal as well as professional. Last question.
Hey, can I?
Please,
if I can, real quickly.
Yes.
One of the individuals that I mentored was a transitioning SEAL, Master Chief, 25 years in the teams. He scared the hell out of me when he walked into the restaurant. And I asked him, I said, so what are your career aspirations on the civilian side? And he goes, well, I want to come in and run a company. And I go, what do you mean run a company? And he goes, I want to be CEO and president. I go, so that's your entry level goal, is to come right from the teams and go right into leading a company that you know nothing about. In fact, you don't even know what industry you want to get involved with. He goes, no, it doesn't really matter. I'm a leader. I can do this. And I said, no, you can't. You're going to fail miserably. And so I gave him advice, an hour and a half over lunch, talking to him about what he should do. And it's the same advice I gave my son, same advice I gave my daughter. And they balked, all 3 of them balked at it initially. 3 months later, that SEAL called me back up and said, I encountered the resistance that you told me I would, and I realized that everything that you were saying about starting at a lower level within a company that I really wanted to be involved with for the right reasons, and that my performance would make itself evident to the leadership within that company. And he goes, and I've already been promoted 3 times in 3 months. And awesome. And now I'm leading a division. And the next step for me is into the executive ranks. And he goes, it was really hard for me to hear you tell me that I wasn't qualified to go in and be the CEO of a company from on day one. I told him, you may fast track, but and at some point, it may not even be in the company you start with. You may end up in another company in a leadership position, but you're going to rise to the top. But understand, you're going to have to eat some crow initially. And so that's my advice also, is that don't plan on going in at the top. I did, I was maybe a rung or two down,
right.
But eventually it took me 13 years to get to the CEO position, and then I quit.
So what's the moral of that story? Kind of have a little bit of humility, understand
Yeah,
your identity is a 10, your role coming out in any new position is a 0 when you first start. Just acknowledge that and know it takes some time.
Especially if you're transitioning from retirement in the military. You've been doing things at a very high level, very competently and proficiently for 20, 30 years. You are not the big man on campus anymore. You are going to go in and you might have to take orders from a 25-year-old who is a Harvard Business School graduate, who knows more about the business than you do at that point. But he or she probably doesn't have a clue about leadership. So there's a give and take there. There's a mentorship upward and mentorship downward. And there, the next thing you know, that individual will probably end up working for you. But it's going to take time. So be patient. Have strategic patience in your career progression as you move forward.
Paddy, that's perfect. This has been great. Literally more questions available are for me now to ask you another time. So maybe have you back on again if you'd be so interested. Last question before Patrice come back and kind of wrap things up. Are we down for a beer?
Yes.
Hey, got the yes. That's great. On that note, Patrice, take it away.
All right. Brett, how can listeners reach you?
Oh, yeah. SWE90.com. We do, again, wealth management and business consulting for veteran entrepreneurs and their companies. So SWE90.com. And then my direct line, 310-491-7045, 310-491-7045. Strategic Wealth Endeavor.
All right, so for all you listeners, follow and subscribe to this podcast to know when the latest episode is ready for you. And if you find this information helpful, please share with friends and colleagues. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for listening to the Veteran Entrepreneur Masterclass podcast. Don't forget to click the follow button to become notified when new episodes become available. Securities offered through IFP Securities LLC, DBA Independent Financial Partners, IFP, member FINRA, and SIPC. Investment advice offered through IFP Investors LLC, DBA Independent Financial Partners, IFP, a registered investment advisor. IFP and Strategic Wealth Endeavor INC are not affiliated. The views expressed are that of the host and are for informational purposes only, and in no event should be construed as an offer to buy or sell securities. Opinions expressed are subject to change without notice and do not take into account the particular investment objectives, financial situation, or needs of individual investors. Neither IFP Investors LLC, IFP Securities LLC, DBA Independent Financial Partners, IFP, nor their affiliates offer tax or legal advice. Interested parties are strongly encouraged to seek advice from qualified tax and or legal experts regarding the best options for your particular circumstances. The information given herein is taken from sources that IFP Advisors LLC, DBA Independent Financial Partners.